We're back and ready to dive into a topic that's really close to my heart as a social worker, self-care. Elaine Book will facilitate this session. She has worked in the field of social work for over 30 years in a variety of community and hospital settings with interest in geriatric populations. She's worked with individuals, families, and as a leader of support groups. She is the center coordinator and clinic social worker for the Pacific Parkinson's Research Center, a Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. Elaine is joined by Joan Hlas, a social worker who has worked at Struthers Parkinson's Center, a center of excellence, for almost 15 years. She is currently the supervisor of the CREATE program, which encompasses the support and wellness programs at Struthers, while serving clients in the clinic and facilitating support groups. Joan has presented at numerous patient and family, as well as professional conferences, helping to provide education and awareness of Parkinson's disease. Our final panelist is Jessica Shurer, the center coordinator and clinical social worker at the Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence and the Cure PSP Center of Care at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Elaine is going to start us off with a brief overview of what self-care is so that we're all starting off really understanding what we can do to take care of ourselves and what you should be doing to make sure you're prioritizing yourself as you care for your loved one with Parkinson's. So take it away, Elaine.
So thank you for that introduction. I am Elaine Book, and with me today is Joan Hlas. Maybe Joan, give a wave so everybody knows who you are, and Jessica Shurer. And we are going to be talking with you about self-care. And we just really want to also thank you for tuning into the Care Partners Summit, because actually that's an action of self-care. That's learning about what you need to do to be a better care partner, to be a better spouse, daughter, whatever your relationship is, and to help you be the best that you can be. So we thought we would just start off with a little bit about, well, what does self-care mean? What does that mean? So a couple of definitions of self-care. So self-care is about the practice of taking action to preserve or improve your own health. Another definition is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, and often during times of particular stress. And self-care also, another definition, is that intentional and deliberate care of one's mental, physical, and emotional health through everyday practices and activities. So that's kind of a definition of what we're thinking about when we talk about self-care. Now, there are lots of different types of self-care. There's physical self-care. That's when we refer to sleeping well and eating well and exercising. There's emotional self-care. That's kind of when you take some time out every day to reflect on how you're feeling and maybe some time to work through some difficult emotions that you might be experiencing. Really treating yourself as you would treat a friend who might be going through a difficult time. So that's emotional self-care. Intellectual self-care, that's where you want to kind of stimulate your brain with something that might be fun for you. It might be visiting an art museum or in writing a poem or reading a book. It's about just stretching those mental muscles so that they don't stiffen up. There's also spiritual self-care, and that does not necessarily mean religious, but for some people it is attending a religious service, or for some people it's some self-prayer on their own. For other people it's sometimes just going and helping somebody else. Other people use a gratitude journal to kind of go on their spiritual path. So that's spiritual. Something called adventurous self-care. So that's where you really want to try something that's outside of your box, because, doing something that is not within your regular routine can really open up your mind and open up your soul and give you another sense of purpose. And finally, sensory self-care. So that's really indulging your five senses. So it might be going and watching a beautiful sunset, or it might be lighting a candle that has an aroma to it. It might be cozying up with a warm blanket. It might just be doing some deep breathing exercises. So really, or perhaps listening to music. So tapping into any of those sensory things that we have going on. And so as individuals, we really all need different things. And so the way that we practice self-care is very individualized. But so no matter what that looks like for you, self-care is just really important to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself and for your well-being. It really does produce positive feelings and can boost your confidence and your sense of self-esteem as well. So carving time out for self-care is really necessary. It's necessary to remind yourself and others that your needs are important too. And so a whole bunch of you have written in amazing questions to the Parkinson's Foundation, and they gathered them all up and kind of tried to put them into some semblance of categories for myself and Joan and Jessica to respond to. And so we've tried to select ones that are going to address people's most common concerns. And that's what we're going to try and accomplish this morning. So we're going to jump right into questions, and we're going to start with Jessica. So Jessica, this question, I'm going to combine two questions. They're similar, one from Shirley from New York and one from John from Texas. And the questions are, so what is the best way to stay healthy when you're caring for someone with Parkinson's? And similar twist on that is, what is the best way to help your person with Parkinson's take care of themselves?
I think we could probably spend a whole panel just on these questions. And I think you also outlined a lot of good thoughts around this in your introduction as well. But I don't think there's going to be a one-size-fits-all answer for how people can take care of themselves and stay healthy with this. What that means for you and how that shows up in your life is very personal. But like you mentioned in the introduction, Elaine, a lot of it ultimately boils down to making sure your physical and your emotional well-being is also being addressed while you're taking care of somebody else with Parkinson's disease. Because often I see with Parkinson's disease, it's so life can just start to revolve around that. If you're reminding someone to take their medications on time, and now it's time to exercise and pick up your feet higher when you're walking and keeping up with all the doctor's appointments, it's easy to lose track of that in yourself as the care partner too. But just as someone with Parkinson's needs to go to the doctor and monitor their mood and exercise, a care partner needs to as well. I've seen it be really successful if you have a way to help hold you as the care partner accountable to your own health and your own self-care. So if that's making a routine that you could put on a calendar to keep up with, like times when you're going to exercise, or looking back, wow, I haven't seen my doctor in a year, maybe it's time I need to do that. Or if you have your partner with Parkinson's, so they can feel a little bit like they're in a caring role too, or your best friend or an adult child, check in with you once in a while and say, how have you been doing? Or, you know what, you told me that last night you got a really bad night's sleep. Maybe leave those dirty dishes for me to take care of, or for tomorrow, and go to bed early tonight. Just some way that you can be, like you said, be intentional about carving out time for yourself, stepping away from the role for a little bit, recharging and reapproaching things, but also not getting completely lost in that role, and remembering that you're a whole person and you need to address yourself wholly.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Joan, next question is for you from Eleanor in New York. And she asks, how do you make time for yourself when you don't have any help coming in?
Great question, Eleanor. I suppose, like Jessica said, not an easy answer and very individualized, though I think a lot of people do find themselves in this spot. Particularly now with our COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people are not using outside resources to get support. Adult day programs, even in-home care, people have cut back on. So this is an important question for lots of people. I guess my key answer is being creative. It's trying to come up with ways to work around your time, your person with Parkinson's time. First thing I'll say is sometimes people have to do their things together. So if your self-care is exercise, you probably maybe have to exercise with your person with Parkinson's. You put on a yoga video, you put on a chair exercise video, and the two of you might do it together. Might be at different intensity levels depending on your person with Parkinson's, but certainly you want to put your effort into doing your best and getting that exercise that you need. It might be that you do some yoga or meditation together, listening to music, time to just sit in your own thoughts and encourage your person with Parkinson's to do their thing while you're doing yours. A lot of it might depend on how independent your loved one with Parkinson's is. Another big one I hear a lot, I have the opportunity to work with a lot of caregivers. I lead support groups and do a lot of individual work, is planning your time. So when your loved one is taking a nap, that's your time. When your loved one is sleeping in because they don't get up terribly early, that is your time. A lot of people tell me that they treasure their morning cup of coffee. It's their time to do their prayer, their meditation, maybe their exercise. So using that time, and it's maybe doesn't come so natural because you're just used to doing things when you want to do them, and now you're kind of stuck to your loved one's routine. But I think a lot of people with Parkinson's do take naps, or they do sleep late or go to bed early, so using that time. The third one I've learned, particularly because of this COVID-19, I'm checking in quite regularly with some of my clients. Many of them are recruiting family members to do things online with them. So for instance, I've been sending ideas to some of our families about trivia questions and discussion questions to keep their loved one's mind active. So a couple of my folks have been having their family members on a Zoom call. They're emailing the trivia questions to family members, and then the family members are getting the person with Parkinson's on a Zoom call, and they're doing the trivia questions with them. At that time, the caregiver is off doing their own thing. Maybe they've left the home, maybe they're just in a different space doing some of their own stuff. This is a way, again, it's not paid help. A lot of times family and friends want to help, and might be a creative way to engage them. I heard a great story of I think probably a school-age grandchild was reading to their grandparent with Parkinson's. And again, it was a respite time for the wife to go do some, she was outside gardening, and the grandfather was sitting with his grandchild reading to him online. So I think, again, that key word is being creative with your time, and even if it's not formal help, what are some other ways to get that free time for yourself?
Thanks, Joan. I love that last suggestion about using Zoom, because of the time that we're in right now, that's becoming more and more accessible to people and usable in different ways, and it's just a really almost a silver lining that's come out of the situation that we're in. So thank you for that. So I'm going to take the next question, which was from Mary from California. And she asked, how can I live my own life fully without feeling guilt, or that I'm leaving my loved one behind while I'm out having fun? We were always joined at the hip, so now what? And this is a comment that I hear from care partners all the time, that issue of guilt. And what we know is that guilt is rarely a very productive emotion to feel. So it's really important that we talk about this and try to wrap our heads about how can you still go out and do things that you need to do or want to do that are part of self-care and part of bringing you joy in your day, while perhaps leaving the person at home. And so I think the first thing that I would say is you've got to really realize that doing something fun for yourself, or exercise, or whatever it is that you need to do is about self-preservation. It's not about indulgence. It's about self-preservation. We know that you can't pour from an empty cup. The analogy of putting the mask when you're flying, you put the mask on yourself first before you help the other person. It's along that kind of philosophy that we're encouraging care partners to adapt, to adhere to. Yes, you have a lot of responsibilities, but as a care partner, one of your responsibilities is actually taking care of yourself. And so one of the suggestions that I've made to care partners in the past is that if you are going out, say, to an evening show, put some sort of a plan in place for the person with Parkinson's who's staying home for something that's going to be enjoyable and something for them to look forward to as well. So maybe it's going to be a friend who's coming over to watch a movie that they've really wanted to watch, or some or bringing in a relative who's going to do some baking that night, or bringing in takeout food that night. So when you are carving these times to go out and do something fun for yourself, try to again get creative and think about what are some things that you can bring in for the person with Parkinson's that's also going to bring them joy to their day. All right, we will carry on. For Jessica, this is from Nancy from Virginia. What do you recommend for maintaining patience as a care partner? And similarly, Rhonda from Georgia was asking, how do I maintain empathy? So we're kind of talking about patience and empathy in the care partner role.
These are huge questions, and I wish that I could have a profound and straightforward answer. I could ask myself the same thing about how I respond to my 2-year-old son, or frankly, my husband sometimes. I think first recognizing that you're only human, and that means that it's literally impossible to be patient and empathetic at all times, and that's okay. I think the more stressed people are, the harder time they're having, the less patient and empathetic they're going to be, because your tolerance threshold is going to be lower. So that goes back into checking in with yourself and asking, are there areas of my life that I could implement additional support in, or change things a little bit in order to improve my general well-being? And I think that's especially important right now with the coronavirus situation. We all kind of operate at one level all the time, and that might be, your threshold for stress and anxiety might look one way most of the time, and now it's probably a lot different because we have this extra layer on top of it. So it's a perfect time to be intentional about, how am I doing? Have I been shorter tempered? Am I getting sleepless nights because I'm ruminating over things? And what can I change? For patients, again, easier said than done, but I think a big thing is to find ways to ground yourself. So this can look like walking away into a different room and taking some breaths for a few seconds or a few minutes, and then revisiting that situation from maybe a calmer approach. A grounding exercise that's really quick that I actually know some care partners and some people with Parkinson's, in fact, who practice is called the 5 senses activity. So that is, and if you find yourself really feeling very out of control or very anxious or very stressed, thinking about, I'm hoping we can remember this, 5 things around you that you can see, 4 things that you could touch, 3 things that you can I'm going to forget it now. 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And that really just brings you back into this moment, takes your mind away from things for a second, and then you can revisit the situation. And then when it comes to empathy, again, that's just such a huge and important question. But I think the first and most important step is validation of someone's feelings. You might not agree with their feeling or be able to relate to how they're feeling, but you can still probably name how they're feeling. And I think that goes a really long way. I think if someone's faced with a really high stress situation, you have a tendency to just react really impulsively in a very tense kind of way, like person with Parkinson's is putting on their pants in the other room, and they know very well to wait until you can come and help stabilize them to put on their pants. And you don't know they're doing that, and they kind of yell out in exasperation. They stumble aside and they knock their lamp over, and your inclination might be, oh, you know to wait for me. You know to call on me, and you're not supposed to do this by yourself. And why didn't you call on me? But you can still say, I'm really unhappy that you didn't wait for me because we've talked about this, but I cannot begin to imagine how frustrating it must be for you to not be able to do this easily or by yourself. I hate that for you. I wish that I didn't have to be here while you put on your pants, but I do. That must be really hard. So just pinpointing that emotion instead of trying to fix it, or sometimes it can feel invalidating to just brush past it and just, move on with the situation in a frustrated way.
Thank you, Jessica. And the other thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about patience was just that recognizing within yourself when you feel like you're starting to lose your patience. And then what are some of the things that you can do once you recognize those kind of feelings inside, whether or not it's a tight chest or start to sweat or whatever that looks like when you're starting to get upset. Recognize those signs, and then, like Jessica suggested, take a break, do what you need to do in order to reground yourself. And also then it's about looking at some triggers as well. So what are some of the triggers that are causing you to lose your patience? And are there some changes that you might be able to make in those areas that might help you to manage your patience? Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to take the next one. This is from Australia. So how do you continually remain positive even though the changes before your eyes are sad and your partner sometimes repeats the same thing continuously? How do you remain positive? And so, I think the first thing that I would want to say is that it's sometimes it's okay to not be okay all the time. It's okay to not be positive all the time. It's okay to have what I refer to as a boo-hoo day when you're just sad that this has happened. So we have to give ourselves permission to do that sometimes. And of course, then find the strategies and the abilities to then take that and put it back on the shelf and carry on with your day and trying different strategies in order to bring back that positivity in your life. So the one thing is just realizing that that's okay. I think the other thing that's really important is to focus on what you do have. So not so much focusing on what's changed or what you've lost, but focusing on what you do have. And oftentimes people find it beneficial to do like a gratitude journal. So it might be something that they decide to do in the morning when they get up in order to charge their day, or they might do it in the evening, kind of reflecting on the day and really looking at what made me laugh today, what made me smile today, what was an unexpected gift that I received today. And, there's loads of, if you Google gratitude journals or gratitude prompts, loads of different things to help get you started. If you've never written a journal before or done anything like this, there's lots of different prompts online available that you could kind of take a peek at to get you started. But I think those are just kind of the first couple things that come to my mind.
And Elaine, if I could add to that too, I love that you said that it's okay to not be positive all the time. A lot of messages that I hear from care partners are that if it's almost like one thing, or like this black and white kind of thinking, like if I'm not positive all the time, that means that I'm negative. But I think that it's okay to feel all of the feelings. Like you can recognize that this is an unfortunate situation, that you are not happy that this is happening, that you wish it was a different way, but also still find hope and joy and positivity. And like you said, gratitude at the same time. You can have both. It doesn't have to be either or.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's being,
oh, go ahead, Joan.
I would just add, it's being an optimistic realist. I mean, this is a reality people have to live with, but it's trying to find the optimism in it.
So Jessica, back to you from Carol from Kentucky, who is asking, how do I deal with the unpredictability of the disease?
I hear a lot from people with Parkinson's and from care partners that that's one of the most difficult aspects of living with Parkinson's, to even to not be able to plan for something in a few months from now, or in a year from now, or next week, or in 2 hours. If there's motor fluctuations, or someone didn't get a good night's sleep, or whatever. And I think that can lead to people feeling like they're not in control, or not prepared, or they're walking, you're on your toes all the time because you don't know what's going to happen. I think, again, we have to acknowledge the situation that we're in right now with coronavirus, that's even more enhanced right now, or even outside the context of Parkinson's, to feel like you're feeling unsettled and you don't know what's going to happen next. It's a really hard thing to just sit with, that uncertainty all the time. I think you can try to really focus on things you can prepare for as much as possible, at least some big scenarios. That can look like having some of those tough conversations that aren't really pleasant around when you might need to bring in outside help, or ways that you're struggling, or hospitalization, or advanced care planning, so that at least if those kinds of things come up, you can feel a little bit more in control and have some peace of mind. But also confidence in reminding yourself when things are unpredictable, having confidence that you've faced unpredictability before with this disease or in life, and somehow you've had the strength and the skills to figure it out. So maybe practice once in a while thinking back to other times that you faced unpredictability, and what helped you through those situations that you can apply to unpredictability going forward. In addition to just allowing yourself that space to sit with things feeling a little unsettled and out of control, and that it's okay.
Joan, over to you. How do you get around, excuse me, the feeling of resentment? Not because of the Parkinson's, but rather other factors that have been involved with my own health and my well-being. And this is from Luann in Nebraska. So talking about feelings of resentment.
Sure. Oh, so resentment is a tough feeling to deal with. I think it's a matter of, it's our past travel with us, perhaps. Again, she's mentioned it's not necessarily due to Parkinson's. Certainly people with Parkinson's and their caregivers do deal with resentment, anger about why this happened to me. Kind of this isn't how I thought my life was going to be. My feelings might start to pop up for people. Regret how they handled situations. Erin did a nice job talking about patience and losing your patience. And I think people can have resentment of how they handled things and feel bad about that. Tricky to answer this in a panel like this. So I think, when I've met people that are dealing with struggles and it's kind of coming to play because they're meeting a professional in a Parkinson's situation, say they come into my clinic, I often talk about how when we look back, we have to sort of deal with these things. And I think even her question might tell her she probably needs to deal with this a little deeper. The use of ongoing therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy gets thrown out a lot as we work with our folks with Parkinson's. It's a very concrete therapy that pushes us to focus more on how the thoughts are related to our actions and feelings. So for instance, if there's a feeling about resentment and a constant thought that might come up with, if I didn't have to deal with this, I would feel better, or I would feel more relaxed, or I would have time to do my self-care, as we all have been talking about today. And that same thought keeps popping up as each situation that you enter. Cognitive behavioral therapy can give some good techniques for people to work on. So I might suggest that the person seek out therapy, more intentional maybe it's a licensed social worker, a licensed psychologist. And even in our COVID-19 situation, you can access online therapy. Many insurance providers are covering it. So a step might be to talk with your own family practice doctor or internal medicine doctor and ask for referrals for therapy. If you've done it in the past and kind of thought, well, I thought I covered it then, these kind of things can pop back up when we don't realize they're coming into play. And so maybe the stress of a current situation that we're in, more time together and at home, maybe these feelings are popping up more. And so it's time to go back to therapy, even if you've done it before. If you've never done it, I always tell people, give it a good shot. Give it 2, 3, 4 sessions before you say, this isn't for me. It can feel kind of foreign, again, especially if you have to do this online thing. I think there's people working around that. But I know of many therapists who are getting training in how you can do phone counseling and online counseling. So it's definitely happening at this time as well. So I hope I answered your question. It's not the easiest thing. Resentment is a tricky thing that travels with us, I think, a lot, unless you start to really get in and to deal with it.
Thank you, Joan. And I think one of the questions that's coming up in a few minutes as well, which just talks about appreciation or the lack of appreciation from the person who you're caring for, that kind of feeds sometimes into resentment. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But, sometimes when people are feeling resentful, I encourage them to think about what it is, like, dig deep, peel back the layers of the onion to figure out what it is what is at the root of these feelings. And then you're maybe able to problem solve a little bit and make some small changes, because we know that small changes can have significant impact. Jessica, you're up next. Here's a question from Virginia in Michigan. How do we, my partner and I, maintain our identity apart from Parkinson's? It feels like our world is becoming narrower and narrower as we progress through this disease journey. And I feel we need to really make a concerted effort to keep our interests and identities separate and apart from Parkinson's disease.
It's a really good question. I think that kind of touches back to what we were talking about being intentional, that sometimes people wait for just naturally for times to come up when they're going to forget about Parkinson's, or where the word doesn't come up in that day. And sometimes that might not happen. So self-care in this context of remembering your other identities and your other roles, and how you are more than a Parkinson's care partner, or you're more than a person with Parkinson's, you have to find that in yourself. And so I know someone who, they challenge themselves every single week. I forget what day of the week, but they have one day every week where themselves and their care partner, it's the care partner and the person with Parkinson's, will not say the word Parkinson's the whole day. Like, they still go about their routine of it's time to exercise and take your medicine and everything, but just, we're going to ignore that word the whole day, even though we know it's present. And then occasionally they try to do a whole week or like a few days of that. And so I think that purposefully giving yourself that time where you can feel like your whole world is not revolving around this is really important. Remembering that you have all these other identities and these roles that might overlap with your Parkinson's care partner role, but that you bring to the table of, I am also, you know, a mother, and I'm a friend, and I'm a really good cook, and I have, you know, a master's, and I mean, whatever other roles and identities you have that you can be proud of and spend some time in. And then asking, and I think, sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over this, but it's just such a good question. I think having that as a conversation with your partner is a really good step too, of what are some things that we can implement so that we can feel like we separate ourselves from these roles a little bit. Like, can we spend some time doing something we're both enjoying where neither of us are thinking about Parkinson's disease? Or flipping it and finding if there's some moments where the person with Parkinson's can be contributing to care and caring for you as the person, as the care partner, where they feel like they have that role and you feel like the recipient once in a while. I think it just takes a lot of planning. And if you notice that you've gone a week where you just feel like your whole life, that whole week has revolved around Parkinson's, being like, you know what, I'm going to set an intention for this next day, or I'm going to do this thing differently, or try to bring in some support so that I'm not getting lost in that all of the time.
And I think that I would just kind of validate what you were saying, Virginia, is that yes, it is intentional and it is a concerted effort to keep your other interests and identities alive. And it may be so intentional that it's that you actually join a club or a class that is completely outside of anything you would have ever considered before, where you now establish connections with people who are not in the Parkinson's world. And so that whole activity is completely separate. You know, there's so much to be said for connecting with people with Parkinson's and being a part of the Parkinson's community, but I think there's something really to be said for making these social networks outside of the Parkinson's community as well. Thank you for that great question. Over to you, Joan. So from California, from Bev. So I'm going to put two of these together because they were quite similar, from Bev and also from Vicky from Washington. So basically, it's about very frustrating to me that that my person with Parkinson's really expresses very little appreciation for what I do and very little concern for my problems, and in fact, somewhat treats me like a servant. I continually tell him that I hear words of appreciation, that I need to hear words of appreciation in order to keep going. This is totally different than what his behavior was like before Parkinson's. He was very loving, caring, always thanked me for every little thing that I did for him. And then similarly was kind of feel like an unpaid volunteer maid. My husband shows gratitude to others way more than he shows them to me. I feel like I don't have a life of my own, and I know he appreciates what I do, but I rarely hear it. What can I do to get over and just kind of keep being my sunny self and soldier on? So I think it ties into kind of what we alluded to a little bit earlier, but really looking at how do you keep going when you're receiving very little appreciation back.
Right. It doesn't surprise me that we had two questions very similar. I actually think this is a common theme that I hear from caregivers. I don't really get a lot of appreciation. I mean, I feel like a servant's kind of harsh, but I've actually heard it plenty before. I've been doing this a while, and I've worked with a lot of caregivers. So I think that's my first thing is just to these people who might be sitting and haven't met a whole lot of other caregivers, they are not alone. A lot of people experience these feelings and this frustration, particularly the changed. You know, like their husband or loved one used to be very understanding, and we always did things together, and there was a definite appreciation, and now we have a totally different person. So I think we see that a lot, and whether we want to put that on some depression or apathy that the person with Parkinson's might be experiencing, it still leaves the caregiver not feeling so good about the situation. So I think the biggest thing to understand is we can't necessarily change people, especially if both of them have felt like they've already said, please show me some appreciation, or are you at least grateful for what I'm doing? And there hasn't been a lot of change. And that's like the hardest part, is recognizing, I don't think I'm going to change this person. So what are some other ways a person can be validated? Is it having a good friend that you can vent to, and telling that friend there probably isn't anything the friend is going to do to fix it, but I just need someone to hear me, someone to hear my frustrations and emotions. Then I can dump it out, and then, okay, I can move on and soldier on, as that person put it. Support groups are really good for this. I've mentioned previously that I run a couple different support groups for spouses, family members. They're a place where you feel like you're not alone. As you're talking, you'll see heads nodding, you'll see people that get it. I know not every community has the option for support groups, so I think it would be looking for what might be out there. There are online groups that people can do. There are some phone calling, different groups that people can be a part of. I also think that if you can't find a Parkinson specific caregiver group, that you certainly, a lot of places will have more of just a caregiver group that might find people with Alzheimer's or other ailments. A lot of caregivers, no matter if it's Parkinson's or what they're dealing with, find that they feel like they're serving, they're everything for their loved one, and the gratitude is not always there. So I think a support group is a great way to connect with other people. I think my last thing, and you guys are doing a great job answering questions and alluded a little bit to this, but there's this idea of separating the disease from the person. So we can have resentment, anger, frustration, all these feelings that pop up. We can't point them necessarily to the husband, the wife, the parent that you might be caring for. It's the disease. Parkinson's, to be frank, just plain sucks, right? We all know that. And it's okay to just be angry at Parkinson's and be frustrated with Parkinson's and express that. One of my favorite stories comes from this. She was a little Scottish woman, so she had a thick Scottish accent. And she had a husband he was a very loving man, and he definitely was nicer to the rest of us than her. The stories she would tell, I was shocked. I would like, are you kidding me? He's like the sweetest little guy when I see him. And so, but she had to figure out a way to vent. So what she did was she had this favorite pillow, and it was a bright, sunny pillow as she described it. She would take the pillow and she would walk into her walk-in broom closet. It obviously was big enough for her to get into. And she would scream in the pillow. She called it her Parkinson's venting pillow. And that was how she just got emotions out. And so the second person's question was like, okay, how do I just acknowledge this stuff and then figure out to soldier on or carry on? Maybe that's it. Maybe you act like Miss Margaret and you grab your pillow, you scream in your pillow, and you get it out. It's not going to solve everything. Is it going to make him say thank you more often? Probably not. But it's just a way to express those feelings, as Elaine, you were talking about. You have to recognize there's the icky in this. You're not always going to be positive and sunny. Frankly, none of us. That's none of our life, especially now with being stuck at home and, working out of our lovely homes that we're doing. So we have to figure out how to get out the yucky and then to find positive. So hopefully that answered their questions.
So just as you were talking as well, Joan, it always conjures up other people who I've worked with and what their experiences were. And, some of it is about, we have to ask for what we need as well. And so if you do need more appreciation, while I completely agree with Joan in saying, part of this is the Parkinson's impacting their personality, especially if you're seeing a change. And part of it was their core personality. They weren't an overly appreciative person before. But then you can, try to ask for what you need. So when you provide the meal and you've had your dinner, then you say, you prompt and you say, did you enjoy that meal? Yeah, I did. And, kind of like what I did when I was raising my family, and I still do now, as Jessica alluded to her husband, mine as well, where you kind of say, and you say, thank you. So it's also modeling it and help, I don't think it's that they don't truly appreciate what you're doing. It's just they might need to be cued. And that those thank yous don't have to be, lavish gifts or anything. It can simply be the word thank you. Anyhow, I had one caregiver who actually put a sticky note up on the mirror where her husband, brushes his teeth every morning and goes to bed every night. And it was some message about, reminding him to say thank you to her, or to say I love you, or to say I appreciate you. So it's just we may have to ask for what we need, and we may need to ask for it on a daily basis as well. And it kind of leads into the next question that came from Linda from Kansas, which is, how do I keep love alive when I'm so busy every day with all the tasks that need to get done? And I think that relationship intimacy piece is just such an important question that we hear all the time. And just in terms of some resources, and I know a lot of resources are on the Parkinson's website about intimacy, but certainly looking at some YouTubes from Gila Bronner out of Israel and Sheila Silver from Portland. They've got some really great pieces on keeping love alive at this time. So I would encourage you to look at those. But what some of their main messages really are: calendar it. Put it in your calendar in order to make it happen. Because you're right, lives are so busy, the day gets taken up with Parkinson's related activities and wellness, but also activities of daily life like grocery shopping and paying bills and doing laundry. And how do you fit this in? And it's really about carving it. And also that has to do with fluctuations, motor and non-motor fluctuations that people with Parkinson have. So at night is not necessarily going to be the best time for people to be together and intimate, or even if it's not sexually active, but just being together. We're tired at that point. Symptoms may be worse. So, the best time of day might turn out to be 1 p.m. And really, again, being intentional about a good morning kiss or a good evening kiss, or while you're watching the news, holding hands. So really looking at what are ways that you can incorporate into your day. And it's like any habit. You need to do these things for 3 or 4 weeks before it now becomes habitual and becomes more a part of your day. But maybe even a starting place to, once we get so buried by this Parkinson's thing, if you can kind of just look back to what were the things that I loved about this person? Why was the reason that I married this person in the first place or got together with this person? And just refresh your memory of what those things are, because in all likelihood, those things are still there. But I would really encourage you, that question in and of itself is a webinar all on its own. So I would encourage you to look at some of the other resources that are available for a lot of tips on how to maintain that kind of a relationship. Another question was, how can I help him without him totally depending on me? I don't want him to feel useless. And this is from Peru. I got so excited to see questions from all over the world. So, I think it's important to look at what the needs are that he has. And are there other ways for those needs to be met other than by you? Are there ways that he's able to maintain his independence? So, for instance, if it's doing up shoelaces, which are really too difficult anymore to do, then let's look at a different type of a shoe, which will allow him to still put his shoes on by himself. Or there's lots of other adaptive kind of clothing. Or if it's making a meal, maybe there are parts of the meal that needs to be started by you, but can be finished by him. So really, again, looking at what are the things that are challenging and finding ways to support him in his independence. And for this, I would also really suggest that you reach out to the other healthcare professionals in your team, like an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist or a speech therapist, who might be able to provide you with some good tips as to, again, what are the challenges and what are some potential solutions that will allow him to be as independent as he can be. But the other thing that comes to my mind when I think about this is about communication. And so really having that open conversation with him about how do you want me to play into this? Do you want me to let you just try to get dressed for an hour in the morning, or would you like me to come in and help partway through? So when you have that conversation, then everybody is playing in the same field. Everybody knows what the terms of the agreement are, and if his choice is to take a little bit longer to get ready, but to do it by himself, then you know that. So really have the conversation about what are the tasks he does want your help with, and what are the tasks that he doesn't. And if it gets to the point where some of those tasks, the harsh reality is that he really does need the help, then negotiating what that's going to look like as well. Anything else you guys would want to add to that? Okay.
Well, I would add, I want one thing. I have the benefit of having an adult day program at our center for people with Parkinson's. What the program does is it offers respite, of course, for caregivers, but I think what a bigger thing it does is it offers a place and the thing that the person with Parkinson's gets to do themselves. It's their club, their people. They can come home and tell stories about their day. They can feel like they're learning, they're exercising, they're participating in life again and making their own new friends. So if that's an opportunity for people within your communities, explore that. It's something I say, as disability sets in for couples, the world gets smaller and smaller, and everything you do is together. So when it comes to sharing, you're like, what did we do today? Well, I did the same thing you did. So if you can find ways to separate that, despite the ability level, it just gives something more for the person with Parkinson's to say they have their thing. I know a lot of ours at our program, they call it their club. I'm going to club today. What'd you do in club? And so it's their thing. So that's an opportunity. I don't know in Cuba where the question is from, if that's an option, but I certainly explore for other people.
So I'm conscious of our time, and I thought it would kind of be fun for each one of us to kind of give our top tip about self-care as we bring this panel to a close. And so Jessica, what would you like to share as your top tip for self-care for care partners?
For me, a lot of it, I think, comes down to self-kindness. We talked about how to practice being empathetic and patient with others, with the person with Parkinson's, but I think we need to turn that on ourselves as well, reminding yourself that you're doing the best you can with what you've got. Like I said earlier, that you're only human. Somehow you figured that out. And if you could go back in time, or have someone else go back in time to an earlier, many years ago, before Parkinson's was in the picture, and you or that other person told yourself this is something that you're going to face later on down the road, you probably would have no idea how to prepare for that, or what that's going to look like, or how you're going to cope with that. But then reminding yourself that it might not be pretty at times, but you've muddled through it. And through that experience, you've probably gained skills and strengths. And I think reminding yourself that you're smart, you're savvy, you're creative, you're strong, and to be impressed with yourself once in a while and be proud. And I think allowing yourself to be empowered in this role is just a huge step in self-compassion and in loving kindness that we can bring inward, because that is something that we are in control of, or that that we're all in control of, but you are empowered to be in control of as a care partner.
Thank you. How about you, Joan?
Well, mine, we've been talking a lot about self-care and things. So my big thing with self-care is humor. I think I come from a long line of storytellers, and so a lot of people that know me know that I like to tell stories, that I like to somehow relate it to just that we're all in this together, as we're saying, all in this COVID-19 situation. But we are, that's how the world works. We like to make connections with each other and have ways to feel like we can still do this. Nice job, Erin, about talking about self-love as a caregiver, or self-compassion. So humor is a way just to kind of lighten the air, and that can be used for the person with Parkinson's and helping them cope with their thing. And a lot of caregivers tell me stories of things they're just stuck in the middle of, and literally stuck in the middle of, whether it's in the bathroom or the bedroom or wherever it is. Laughing about some of that stuff is okay. It can be very cathartic to just laugh, as you as the caregiver, as with your person with Parkinson's. I know we need to be careful to make sure it's not a hurtful, sarcastic kind of thing, but at the same time, it helps lighten the mood. One of my favorite people, we're probably not supposed to have favorites, but one of my favorite people, he was a brilliant journalist, and he would lose his train of thought as his Parkinson's set in. And it would just drive him crazy. He'd be talking, and then he'd freeze. And he learned this expression of, "Oh, train has left the station." And what it did is, when he would lose his train of thought, everyone got anxious, like, oh no, and they'd feel bad, including himself, his wife, anyone around him just felt bad because this poor, brilliant man could not come up with what he was trying to say. So he used this "train has left the station" as a way to just chill it, everybody. It's all good. It'll come back to me. The train loops back around, and then he would fill in the rest of the sentence. So humor can be used in lots of different ways if it's not coming naturally. Depression set in, you're getting frustrated with life. Sometimes we need to force humor. So I'm a big fan of pulling out the old funny movies. I've been sending tips and suggestions to my folks that I can't reach right now. And so I've been, hey, pull out the old I Love Lucy's, pull out the, Friends are more your thing, Seinfeld, Cheers, all those kind of shows that we love to just laugh at because they're silly and kind of stupid. That's a way to produce humor in your life. If it's not coming so naturally, then you may find that, wow, I laughed a lot today and I'm happy about that. Or you might have to say, I didn't laugh enough today. What do I need to do to bring a little bit more levity and lightness into my life? So that's always my go-to tip for caregivers.
Thank you. These are great tips, and I think we've heard a lot today. And so for me, here we are prescribing, for lack of a better word, prescribing self-care. And so one of the things that I would say to all of you as you're heading off with this information is, what might be some of the barriers that you are experiencing to bringing self-care into your life? And whether that's a personal barrier, like a belief or an attitude that that you don't deserve it, that somebody else has it far worse than you do. So it might be a personal belief. It might be an instrumental barrier, like needing more home support, or other person to come in order for you to have the time. So just encouraging people to, as they want to go forward and create some of these opportunities for themselves, to look at what your barriers might be, and then some creative solutions for that. I think in closing, we would just recommend that you try something out, dip your toe in the water at first, and that is a start and a beginning, and then you'll go from there. Like I think I said earlier today, a small change in one part of your life can have a large ripple effect in many other areas in your life, and that certainly can be the case with self-care. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks to Jessica and Joan for working together. It's been fun to work together remotely. And we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Take care. And thank you to the Parkinson's Foundation for putting this on as well and letting us be a part of it.